Jim, this question for the late night drive-thru comes from Kevin Orcutt.
And by the way, Kevin Orcutt is from Idaho. He's from Idaho. Hello, Kevin. We love you.
In my opinion, Chris Hero may be the most overlooked wrestler in the world today. He has great stamina, his offense is really solid and believable, and he can cut a good promo. Hero is currently in NXT wrestling as Kassius Ohno. He was there before from 2012 to 2013 under the same name and was released by the WWE because, according to them, Hero wasn't committed to physical conditioning programs. But I also heard one of the reasons he may have been released may have been because there were certain guys on the main roster that he thought he was better than, and he wasn't afraid to tell whoever he wanted to tell about it. How successful does Jim think Hero could be on the main roster? I think his biggest issue he may face is his physique. What is Jim's opinion of Hero as a worker? And was he easy to work with? I know Jim was around him a lot in Ring of Honor.
Jesus Christ, what a multifaceted question. First of all, I don't think the way that question was worded, I don't think that Chris is a person, because I've always liked Chris. I thought he's a great guy. He's not a person to go around bragging, I'm better than you, fellow. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure that it was probably frustrating that he was in NXT when there were a ton of people on the main roster that he actually was better than. So I don't think he presented it in exactly that prickish of a way, but I'm sure the question had to be asked at some point. Chris was great. I got to know Chris in Ring of Honor. I'd heard his name for years, but because he was one of the guys from Chicago or from that area that worked IWA he's not from Chicago originally, but it was a group, and Punk was in there, and so was Cabana, that would work for Ian Rotten in Southern Indiana, opposite OVW, and that immediately disqualified them from ever being involved in OVW because we had a strict do not feed the fucking hardcore wrestler rule, and nobody that worked for Ian Rotten was allowed in OVW. So I never saw Chris Hero until Ring of Honor. But then the first time I saw him was when he came over from the Combat Zone Wrestling versus Ring of Honor feud, and he was on the CZW side, and he truthfully didn't physically look that good. But then when I actually really did get to see him, when I went back in 2009 and he was there and he was teaming with Claudio as the Kings of Wrestling, he blew me away. He had really worked. He had lost a lot of weight. He didn't have a muscularly defined physique, but he had lost a lot of weight and looked good. And plus the things he could do, he was 6 foot, whatever, 3 or 4 probably, but could do a handstand on the top rope. He had great balance. Of the way that he executed things, he had good timing, he had good movement. So even though he wasn't a bodybuilder, to me, he was in good physical shape. And he and Claudio, I thought, were the modern day version of the Midnight Express. You gave them a babyface team and they would go out and have a great match with them. They had their own double team stuff and their own great teamwork, but they would have different matches with different style teams instead of just the same match all the time. They did a lot of great and different stuff. It broke my heart when Sinclair bought Ring of Honor that they didn't come with us, because right then is when they got the offer to go to developmental. And I tried to work out anything that I could money-wise to get them to stay, because they were really the backbone of our tag team division. We had Haas and Benjamin were our rock stars, because they could still go and were still real legitimate athletes, but were still young enough, but had the WWF pedigree. And the Briscoes were the homegrown guys. They were incredible. But the Kings of Wrestling could work with either of those teams and anybody else. So they were really, to me, very important. And we knew what was going to happen. We called it at the start. We said they're going to get down there. They're never going to have another tag team match together. They're going to love Claudio because of his physique, and he's got a lot of talent too. But they're not going to do anything with Chris, even though he's the one that trained Claudio, and he's a much better worker than Claudio is because he doesn't look as good. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? And they gave him issues with his medicals and just whatever the fuck, and finally he was gone from there. And I have not seen him wrestle in the past few years, except a couple clips on the internet, and it does look like he's gained a lot of weight. And he don't look as good as he did when he was in Ring of Honor in 2011, whatever that was. But he can still work. He's a great worker. I don't know why they brought him back and gave him that same stupid fucking name, especially when he's the second KO now. And I don't know if they've loosened up restrictions on what his body looks like. I wish he would lose the weight that he has gained and look like he did then, just because it'd probably be healthier for him and easier on him. But you can't fault his work is great. So there you go.
And how successful do you think he could be on the main roster?
Well, he could be successful, but if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass on the ground. It depends on what they do with him, how they use him, how they introduce him, and who he has there to work with that gets his shit too. So anything could happen. It's not, but if he doesn't make it, it's not going to be because he wasn't good enough.